The beginning of Ferrari's championship challenge has been underwhelming as it was outperformed by Red Bull, and its primary vehicle suffered the usual fate of retiring due to an engine issue. The new team boss, Vasser, reiterated his pre-race statement that Ferrari could not win or lose the championship in the first race, and despite the disappointment, his practical approach is appreciated. Statistically, Fred is correct as Ferrari trails Red Bull by 31 points, but with numerous races remaining, there are hundreds of points still available, and therefore, Ferrari's chances are not over. This is basic arithmetic that even we can understand. Well, let's not count Ferrari out just yet after one bad race, but they definitely have their work cut out for them if they want to catch up to and beat Red Bull. The start of their new season didn't go smoothly at all, and they weren't even able to carry over some of the positives from last year when things went wrong. On top of that, they're facing the return of a big weakness from 2022 that was supposed to be resolved, which is not looking good for them at all. Even before the Bahrain Grand Prix began, things weren't looking good for Leclerc and his Ferrari team. During qualifying, his power unit needed a new energy store and controlled electronics, sparking concerns about the battery pack that Ferrari had to thoroughly investigate. To make matters worse, Leclerc was only allowed 2 of these components for the entire season, putting him dangerously close to a grid penalty. But that was just the beginning. During the race itself, Leclerc was forced to slow down and eventually came to a stop due to some unknown problem with the internal combustion engine. This is a nightmare scenario for Ferrari, as they had made reliability their top priority during the winter break. To suffer such a setback right out of the gate is a huge cause for concern. What's more, there were no signs of trouble during dyno testing or preseason running, where all 3 Ferrari-powered teams collectively covered more than 6,000 km. Despite this, Ferrari was unable to offer an immediate explanation for either the battery or engine issues, leaving Leclerc and the team to grapple with a frustratingly familiar feeling of disappointment and uncertainty. Unfortunately, as the 2022 season progressed, Leclerc's frustrations became more apparent. With hopes of a championship title dashed, his demeanor shifted, and he appeared less interested in finding positives. During a recent press conference in Bahrain, Leclerc's demeanor was reminiscent of his later 2022 interviews, with a noticeable lack of enthusiasm and a sense of frustration. It's understandable that Leclerc would feel this way, given the circumstances, and it's not fair to expect any driver to be happy in such a situation. It can be disheartening to put in so much effort only to realize that your car isn't quick or reliable enough to compete. The beginning of this season seems to be all about limiting the damage, as Leclerc finds himself 25 points behind Max Verstappen, with bleak championship prospects. Even Leclerc himself admits that it's hard to find positives in this situation, especially when the usual consolation of a strong performance from the Ferrari last year is missing. It's easier to cope with disappointment if a driver can look forward to getting back in the car and fighting for more wins, but that doesn't seem to be the case for Leclerc and Claire. During the qualifying session, Leclerc opted to only complete one run in Q3 in order to have a fresh set of soft tires for the race start. While he was 0.3 off pole position, it is unlikely that he would have been able to challenge the Red Bulls, even if he had made a second attempt. Ferrari did make gains in reducing the drag level of their car, which was evident in the strong performance on the straights. However, it is a stretch to say that Ferrari matched Red Bull in qualifying, although they were not too far behind on single lap pace. Moving on to race pace, starting on fresh softs did give Leclerc an advantage over the used sets that the Red Bull drivers had, allowing him to jump Perez, who started on the dirty side of the track. However, during the first stint, Leclerc's time loss to Verstappen was consistent from laps 2 to 12, with an average of 0.682 seconds per lap. Despite the consistency, the time loss increased slightly towards the end of the stint due to tire degradation. Overall, while Ferrari showed promising improvements, they still have a ways to go to challenge the dominant Red Bull team. During the first stint of the race, Leclerc managed to hold off Perez, keeping him behind despite not keeping up with the pace set by Red Bull. Perez, however, knew that he would have an advantage in the second stint due to a better tire grip, as he would be using another set of softs, while Leclerc would be using harder. Consequently, Perez didn't take any unnecessary risks to overtake Leclerc at this stage, as it wasn't worth it. Although Leclerc argued that the qualifying pace was similar to Red Bull's, he was critical of the lack of race pace, noting that Ferrari was losing a significant amount of time, around 1 second per lap. Despite having brand new rubber, Ferrari was still conceding at least half a second per lap to Red Bull, even when they were on equal footing with tires. It's reasonable to question how much of the Red Bull team's full potential we even witnessed, given their substantial pace advantage during the race. Ferrari's struggles were so severe that they allowed AlphaTauri's Fernando Alonso to overtake Carlos Sainz and secure the final podium position. Sainz himself admitted that the team's pre-race predictions anticipated Alonso finishing ahead of them. Consequently, it wasn't as if Ferrari was expecting to compete for victory against the Red Bulls. Ferrari's fortunes may improve at the upcoming Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, given the circuit's specific characteristics. However, even considering the unique nature of the Bahrain track, Ferrari's performance was not up to par. A year earlier, Leclerc engaged in a fierce battle with Max Verstappen at the same circuit and emerged victorious. However, this time around, Leclerc couldn't even dream of being in the same fight as the reigning world champion. The Bahrain Grand Prix has left many wondering whether we will witness another season of complete Red Bull domination, surpassing even last year's performance. However, there are indications that Bahrain could represent the pinnacle of Red Bull's dominance. We cannot share Vasser's optimism regarding Ferrari, as it wasn't even the second fastest car on the track. Consequently, Ferrari must play catch-up, but for now, let's focus on whether Red Bull can be caught and the extent of the gap. Verstappen played down the significance of his dominance, and his reasoning holds some merit. One-lap performance in Bahrain differs significantly from the balance requirements in the race. The track necessitates that teams prioritize rear tire preservation, leading to a suboptimal understeer balance over a single lap. Nevertheless, Red Bull's well-balanced downforce distribution throughout its speed range means that it is less handicapped than other teams by this conflict of demands. This advantage holds true for most tracks, except for those where this conflict is less pronounced. Additionally, the extent of Red Bull's advantage in aerodynamic efficiency, derived from last year's car, made it extremely challenging for Ferrari to compete against them, despite having greater peak downforce. That's why Ferrari's focus this season has been on improving their straight-line speed, even at the cost of some downforce. However, they couldn't match the Red Bull's aero efficiency in Bahrain, which turned the Ferrari into a heavy user of its rear tires, resulting in a big penalty due to the track's high tire degradation. Nevertheless, Ferrari is confident that there is nothing conceptually wrong with its car, and the belief is that their true performance was showcased in one lap pace, which they should be able to replicate over a stint at most tracks. The team's strategy to prioritize straight-line speed should pay off at more conventional tracks, and Ferrari appears to be in better shape than Mercedes, which is a positive sign for Leclerc and the team. While they may be able to compete with Aston Martin in race trim, they will still be at least a quarter of a second behind the dominant Red Bull team. Hence, Ferrari needs to make significant gains in outright performance to catch up with the leaders. Ferrari knows it has a tough road ahead, with upgrades already underway in the hopes of catching up to the dominant Red Bull. It's no secret that the team expected to start the season at a disadvantage, but it's now facing the harsh reality that it may be even further behind than anticipated. The added concern of reliability issues only adds to the gloomy outlook for Ferrari and the rest of the F1 field in 2023, but there's still hope that Bahrain was an outlier, and Ferrari can turn things around with some major upgrades that surpass last year's lackluster improvements. The pressure is on as it goes up against an ambitious development plan from rival Aston Martin, led by the talented Fernando Alonso. The championship fight hangs in the balance, and Ferrari's ability to bridge the gap will be critical. The team must deliver a significant development step, one that exceeds even their efforts to improve reliability over the winter break. It's a tough ask, but Ferrari is up for the challenge.